If you saw my series on development and aging, you no doubt discovered that our brain undergoes widespread changes throughout the lifespan. And this means go watch my other videos because they're worthy of your attention too. I'm not going to summarize what was stated in my series on development and aging. Now, since we're all up to speed, let's turn our attention to dementia. There are many different kinds of dementia. Understanding dementia is important for two reasons. Namely, given the current hell of a timeline in which we live, dementia has become relevant in a broader conversation centered around determining which old-ass guy is capable of running an entire country. There's also the fact that our asses are gonna age too. Well, if we're lucky, so it'd be nice to have an understanding of something that impacts a lot of people, and potentially ourselves or our loved ones. That being said, I'm not a clinician, so don't be stupid and use this video you saw on YouTube to diagnose yourself or others. Leave that to the professionals and the asshole non-clinicians who make YouTube videos. Dementia is distinguished by the diseases that lead to decline in mental and physical faculties. As such, I'm only focusing on 3 lesser-known dementia-causing diseases. Like, how many times have people discussed Alzheimer's? Frankly, no one would select this video if they're looking for things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. I wouldn't. It's not because my videos are bad, it's just that the view counts are low. When I see videos with low view counts, I'm just like, pass. Mainly because I'm pathetic and I buckle to invisible peer pressure quite easily. So from me to you, thank you for not being pathetic. I'm not being too self-deprecating, right? Let me know in the comments. Before I focus on these 3 dementias, I want you to better understand what is being stated when you hear dementia, with no regard with what caused it to occur. When clinicians, the people not making YouTube videos because they have real lives, such as neurologists and researchers, discuss dementia, we, and I'm putting myself into this category, can you believe this? When clinicians, like neurologists and researchers, discuss dementia, what they're referring to is a whole different set of dementias, except when they're talking to us, because it's just simply easier to use the catch-all term, as every dementia shares characteristics with each other, the primary being mental and physical decline, then ultimately death. So dementia is a catch-all or general word related to conditions that lead to a loss of cognitive, behavioral, and physical functioning. It is both irreversible and progressive. This is the kind of too progressive they keep warning us about. The dementias can be divided into 3 categories: subcortical, cortical, and mixed. So the reptilian brain, the cortex, or both. And no, unlike popular opinion, we don't actually have 2 brains. We have a brain and then something lower that controls it. You know, the stomach. Dementia are traditionally identified based on the area of the brain that is most likely to be affected by the disease or the disorder. Further, dementia is associated with age because the common ones are often seen in older adults, but there are some that can strike at a young age. Regarding how we talk about dementia, we can classify dementia as young age dementia and old age dementia. With that said, most people over the age of 65 will develop dementia, is what I might be able to say if our life expectancy increases, but that ain't gonna happen thanks to everything that's f***ed up about this world. Capitalism. Instead of boring you with data and stats, let's get into the juicy parts. Because face it, our own curiosities often place a big toe in sociopathic water. Well, at least mine do. I can't be the only one here, right?
Narrator. She was.
Okay, so starting with the subcortical dementias, they largely impact areas of the brain like the basal ganglia. While Parkinson's disease, leading to Parkinson's dementia, is the most well-known of the subcortical dementias, I'll be discussing Huntington's disease because your girl's tired and this disease is fascinating to me. But let's not lose sight of how tragic this disease is for those affected by it. A person who develops Huntington's disease can begin to show symptoms early in life, depending on what you consider to be early. We'll say earlier than when you're given permission by the corporate overlords to stop working yourself to death. so around one's 30s and 40s. Huntington's disease is genetically transmitted. This means a parent with Huntington's can produce offspring who go on to develop the disease. If a parent develops Huntington's, the child has a 50% chance of developing Huntington's too. In terms of genetic transmission, that's extremely high. Huntington's is caused by a dominant mutation of the Huntington gene on chromosome 4. If someone inherits this mutation, they have a 100% chance of developing Huntington's. Also, the more that the disease is passed down from generation to generation within a single family, the age of onset decreases. So, the more it is passed down, the age of developing the disease becomes younger and younger. There's no cure for the disease. It will eventually kill the person who has it. As with most dementias, Huntington's is devastating, but this disease, in my opinion, is particularly brutal. Not only is the age of onset relatively young, the age of death is relatively young too, which is generally between 15 and 20 years after the emergence of initial symptoms. The way in which the disease presents is really, for lack of a better word, rough on both patients and caregivers. Huntington's is characterized by dance-like, writhing movements and intellectual deterioration. Other symptoms Huntington's patients can expect are personality changes, depression, mania, and hallucinations. Making an appearance early on is anterograde amnesia. That is the inability to create new memories. The primary area of the brain that is implicated in Huntington's is in the subcortical structure, the basal ganglia. Over time, general atrophy, that is shrinking and thinning, of the cortex occurs. Due to the high heritability of the disease, it can be traced back in time, and researchers have traced it back to the 1600s in a small village in Burrs, England. Some people have even proposed that the people persecuted and then subsequently executed in Salem, Massachusetts during the infamous Salem witch trials were targeted as witches because they had Huntington's, a disease that had yet to be identified during this period in history. Now, I could dedicate a whole episode to Huntington's alone, but for the sake of brevity, let's move on to the cortical areas of the brain. As you may surmise, cortical dementias predominantly affect the cortical structure of the brain. Typically, cortical dementias progress slowly but steadily. The most common dementia of this type happens to be the one people tend to associate with dementia the most, that being Alzheimer's disease. But let's focus on a lesser-known cortical dementia, Pick's disease. Pick's disease is more commonly referred to as frontotemporal dementia. Frontotemporal dementia often develops between the ages of 45 and 65. Early in disease progression, patients with frontotemporal dementia may experience social and personality changes, which is a defining feature of this disease. Patients with frontotemporal dementia experience memory deficits much later in the course of disease, whereas patients with Alzheimer's start experiencing memory changes during the early stages. Also, the occurrence of frontotemporal dementia may result in hyperroreality, exploration of objects with the mouth, and hyperphagia, which is excessive eating. Like Alzheimer's, frontotemporal dementia is definitively diagnosed upon inspection of brain tissue, meaning a definitive diagnosis occurs post-mortem. General brain atrophy is primarily seen in frontal and temporal cortical areas of the brain. Brain tissue reveals swollen or ballooned neurons and a buildup of tau proteins called Pick bodies. As with all dementias, there is no cure for frontotemporal dementia. Since we're here, I want to tell you about my video sponsor, Better Assistant, the phone app that you can use to talk to licensed therapists. Just kidding. But you can sponsor my video by going to my Patreon page and donating. Let's get back to the dementias. Along with the cortical and subcortical dementias, we have mixed etiology dementias. These type of dementias show signs of both the cortical and subcortical dementias, thus potentially impacting a large number of brain areas. The most common dementia of this kind is vascular dementia, which I may discuss in another video. For now, let's focus on an uncommon dementia of this type, Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease. I think I said that right? Or CJD, Thank God there's an acronym, because I'm probably not even pronouncing it right. The cause of CJD is a type of spongiform encephalopathy. The spongiform encephalopathies are neurodegenerative conditions caused by the production and accumulation of prions, a type of protein. CJD is easily distinguished from the other dementias mentioned, both physiologically and psychologically. While the confirmation of CJD is made post-mortem, by inspecting brain tissue, a diagnosis can be made with the help of a neurological examination and inspection of the patient's cerebrospinal fluid obtained from a lumbar puncture or spinal tap. Physical manifestations of CJD include involuntary movements and abnormal reflexes, which is due to muscle twitching and spasms, coordination problems, and areas of blindness. Some psychological manifestations of the illness are changes in perception of visual space, fatigue, anxiety, and concentration problems. These symptoms manifest rapidly, and a patient with CJD will succumb to their illness within 1 year of diagnosis, where the majority of deaths occur within the first 4 months of diagnosis. All the spongiform encephalopathies, including CJD, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, commonly referred to as mad cow disease, and Kuru, result in widespread neuronal death, while increasing the number of glial cells, giving the brain a sponge-like appearance. While it remains unknown as to how CJD produces its effects on the brain, it has been suggested that prions may trigger, prematurely, the naturally occurring programmed cell death mechanism of neurons. Thus, neurons may experience prion-induced apoptosis, and no one is completely safe from developing CJD. While there is familial CJD, meaning CJD can run in families, CJD may be transmitted through the consumption of the protein, or simply by coming into contact with a prion-infected tissue. However, all forms of CJD are extremely rare, with a prevalence rate that if one develops CJD, they would truly be 1 in a million. Hold on, the chances of winning the lottery are 1 in 300 million. Does that mean I'm 300 times more likely to get CJD than to win the lottery? Why did I buy those lottery tickets? Wait, I didn't. I can't afford lottery tickets. I can't afford anything. What am I doing with my life? Dementia may be caused by several different diseases, but is not an expected outcome of aging. Anyone who says this apparently has never met an older adult. The symptoms that appear from dementia is dependent upon which area of the brain are most affected. And a word of advice from me to you, do not give someone with dementia complex and/or stressful tasks. Stress may actually accelerate physical and mental decline in those with dementia. Speaking of, it would be particularly alarming to me to see people willing to place excessive demands, like running to be an elected official, on those who show signs of dementia for the sake of electability, a concept that, in and of itself, relies solely on faith and never on facts. Putting such an excessive demand on someone makes people like me believe that we're living in a nightmare. We'll only wake up upon death, when we're permanently unable to wake up. Anyways, thanks for watching. Oh, okay. And thanks to all of my patrons who have stuck around. So I feel the eyes of judgment upon me.